official welcome comes from you. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Karen. As the thing says, I'm Jeff Notnagel. I know most of you, and I've gotten to know this evening some of the others that I didn't know. I'm treasurer and chair of the Capital Campaign Committee. You may or may not be aware we're doing a major fundraising program to support this whole restoration, preservation program we're doing. And I really ought to start out by thanking all of you folks as citizens and on the various committees for supporting the CPC money, which the town as a whole and the CPC committee voted $50,000 match funding. So for every dollar we pay, they will match up to $50,000. And things are moving. I met with our treasurer last week and brought over the first invoice, which was about this thick. And Phil could explain what's in it, but he was impressed. And along with that was the deposit check, which was the first one. And we pay, and he has a copy of the check that we paid with, and then they write a check back to reimburse us after the fact. And that's, those of you that have done this before may know that. I had to go ask him, how do we do this? And he said, just bring a check over and we'll match it. And so it's a great arrangement, and we're very appreciative of it. So thank you all for your support for that. Karen?
Thank you, Jeff. Way to go. Jeff's thanks to you all for coming and spending some time with us tonight, and for the support that we've gotten from you and from so many for the CPC grant. It really is a launching point for this church. For those who may not know me, I am Pastor Karen. I have a much longer name, and it ends with Bailey Francois, and someplace there's a 6'4" kid who looks just like me. He's mine. And he just finished his coursework in architecture, so he's been very excited about this project. Our presentation tonight is really going to be Phil Lear and Paul Harrison, Phil is a chair of our trustees. Paul is on the board of trustees and has some professional experience that he also brings to this process. So I'm not going to say a whole lot because they have the more interesting parts of the presentation. I did want to say a couple of things about the projects that we're launching, because it's, as Phil had said initially when he said, why don't we invite the commissions to come? It's really important to us to be as transparent as possible, but also to make sure that we identify if there's questions or confusions, because it's easy when there's a lot of players in any particular project to have misunderstandings, or at least misperceptions, if you don't make opportunities to have conversations like this. So we are particularly grateful for your being here tonight. As Jeff mentioned, we are beginning preparations to launch a, for us, fairly sizable capital campaign in order to take advantage of the opportunity to have CPC funding. That was a matching grant of $50,000. Our congregation had committed $50,000 to work with that specifically for the front historic portions of this building, because that was in keeping with what the CPC guidelines required and what the Community Preservation Act legislation mandates. But as you might expect, in a building this old, there are a few more things that should legitimately be done and make the most sense to do, to take advantage of the synergy of doing them together. And so, in addition to the work that is specifically targeted by the Community Preservation Act funding and our matching to that, there are some other projects that are related, and you'll hear about both tonight. If you have any questions about how those are separated out, we'd be happy to answer those. But it felt more natural to tell you what we're doing to make this beautiful historic building more sustainable and restore it for the next 200 years, rather than dividing it up into little pieces. Does that make sense? Perfect. Given that, I will ask Phil and Paul to come up and begin telling you about the work we're doing, and then we thought we would take a walking tour so that you'd be able to see the parts and ask questions as we go. So thank you again for coming.
Great, why don't you walk away with that?
I won't.
Evening, thanks for coming. 100 years is kind of a high expectation on that.
Rest of my ministry?
It is a big building, it is an old building, 1827, before the town hall. When was the town hall built?
47, 57, 57.
1857, yeah. So in light of the age, it's always going to need some work, it's going to need some care. We were fortunate that the craftsmanship back in those days led to high-quality buildings with big timbers, well flashed, well protected, so they last for a long time. And many of the issues that we're having with the modern buildings with insulations and vapor barriers, they didn't have because the old buildings breathe, they didn't use insulation. So we're fortunate that our old buildings on the common are in such good shape because of the quality of craftsmanship and the thought behind how these buildings would survive for so long. So we have several projects going on. The big one is the windows. So we have, there's 13 windows that we're going to be replacing up on the second floor. Originally, 6 years ago, we looked at having the windows restored, which means they would actually physically take the windows out of the frames of sashes, take them back to the shop, take all the glass out, take all the paint, the glazing compound, everything on it, and recompose some of the oil back into the wood, prime it, put old glass back into it, glaze it again, paint it, and then reinstall it, along with straightening them, flashing them properly so they work properly, and then hooking them up, because some of them are double hung with weights and chains the way they were originally. More recently, we had someone, fortunately, to have Paul Harrison come on, our trustees, and he worked in a joinery shop, and he's very familiar with building doors and windows. So we have committed to having those particular windows that we're talking about, and we'll show you later on, having them actually, the sashes rebuilt new. It's reasonable and it makes sense. Our windows are now almost 100 years old in those areas. We had some significant damage here in 1928. We had a fire which gutted the building and changed the composure of the whole house. The sanctuary used to be down here. It was raised up after that, and different windows were put in. So it's almost 100 years since the windows have been put in. So we thought by making them new, making them properly, the windows, in theory, we would get the 100 years out of the windows as long as they were maintained, as opposed to trying to fix some of the old windows. We've had several experts come in and look at the windows, and there are challenges with keeping them strong again. We can show you when we get up to the big Palladian window how weak it is. It doesn't have the strength. So not only do you have to rebuild it properly, somehow you have to support it. So our terms now are with new windows, so we don't have to be concerned with the safety issue of the windows. So that's a really good thing. I'm going to have Paula come up here in a second and talk about that. Along with the front of the church, we're talking about redoing the portico railing. So as you walked in, what you stepped under was called a portico. It has a railing that goes around the top. The railing is, again, old craftsmanship, old wood. Even though it hasn't had paint on it for a number of years, it's still in really, really good shape. And that's because of the old growth trees. So you really can't replace that with material nowadays and expect it to last. So the same company that's going to be doing the windows, building the windows for us, is going to be removing the railing, taking it to their shop, and removing all the paint, and again reconstituting the wood with linseed oil type of a mixture, painting it and then reinstalling it. And while they have that off, we'll be looking at the roof structure that is above the portico. Right now, what you see up there is asphalt. And we're quite sure that under that asphalt is copper, because everything was done copper or slate in that era. So we are going to endeavor to get down to the copper and try to not make it new again, but let's get back to original so that it will last the long time that we can. Asphalt, you know, you might get 30 years out of it. Rubber roofings, again, you might get 30, 35 years out of it. So if we can get back to copper and it's not too awful expensive, we'd like to get back to that. And that, you know, shouldn't have to be touched for 50 years. It shouldn't have to be touched for longer than that if it's, as long as it's not bothered by any weather or anything else. So we've got some issues on the front facade. We'll be painting along with the steeple. Some you can see from the street, some you can't. You know, there's some clapboards up above that sit on a flashing and a cross piece that they're going to need some attention. So there's going to be some carpentry work, hopefully as little as possible. Like I said, a lot of this wood is old growth wood. We don't like replacing it. We like trying to reuse it or fix it any way that we can. Maybe some of you had the experience, but you know, that's why we're looking at plastic so many times now, right? And the trim on so many of the houses now are plastic because it lasts. You put the new wood on there now that's from fast growth trees, you prime it, you paint it, you do everything you want, and then 3 or 4 years later, you know, the paint's coming off it, and you know, moisture's sucking up the end grain, and you know, in 6 or 7 years you've got rot issues all of a sudden. That didn't happen with the old growth trees. The old growth trees have very tight grains, and they're very hard wood, so that wasn't an issue. But now we look at these PVC trim and you know, PVC siding and so forth to try to fight that. Some of it looks great, some of it maybe not so much. We are avoiding that. I don't see where we're going to be able to use it. All of the frames of the windows are in really good shape. There's copper flashing in them. They're solid. There's a couple of spots that I think if anything we might just fill them with you know, an epoxy to fill it up. But other than that, they're in really good shape. It's just the sashes that haven't weathered the storm so well. So the sashes are what we'll be going to concentrate on. So the front will be painted. The bell tower is in pretty good shape. The cap of the bell tower under the bell is all copper. All the posts that protrude through that floor that hold the upper part of the tower is all covered in copper. And then the top, of course, is copper. You can see that from the street. And then there's some cornice that goes around it. Some of it's copper and some of it's wood. We won't know when we get up there to how much we got to work on, but I know some of it was placed 30 years ago with some copper, and you can tell from the street that it's starting to separate a little bit. So we'll deal with that when we get up there. We're not sure exactly what we're going to do. But the painting is going to involve some carpentry because we know some clapboards and some of the coin blocking, which are the corner blockings in front of the church, are starting to deteriorate a little bit. And we'll try our best maybe to try to find some old growth wood or something like that. We just want to avoid putting any of the new growth wood up because that in short time it's just not going to last. It's going to start to separate and have the paint peel off it fairly quickly. Paul, do you want to come up and talk about the visit to the window shop and a little bit more about the windows? Sure, that'd be great. This is Paul Harrison.
Hi, everyone.
You love his Boston accent.
So Phil and Karen are a pretty hard act to follow. But my history is carpentry and joinery. I've been a carpenter since I was 17 years old. And back in Australia, I was a licensed builder, so it was sort of my honour to look at finding ways to try and restore this old church. I've got a love of old buildings, so Phil's sort of brought me along here to expand on any details and answer any technical questions that anyone might have. But yeah, basically I think Phil's covered it pretty well. We wanted to sort of maintain the historic look and, detail of the building. So the windows are, they're being made by a traditional joinery shop, the same way they would have been made 100 years ago. So it's all, timber put together piece by piece to make these old sashes. They're still going to maintain the weights to counterbalance them, and hopefully they'll last another 100 years.
Yeah.
We did investigate, like Phil said, we did investigate having them restored, but they were it's just such a big job to do that. And when they made these old windows, they kind of did it in a way that you're able to remove the sashes and build new ones and replace them. It's sort of a moving part that's replaceable. So we were pretty happy to find this place. They're down in Stonington, which is sort of the border of Rhode Island and Connecticut. And they do a lot of work on 17th century buildings, so this is kind of easy for them. This is right up their alley doing this work for us. So. And the other thing is they ship their work halfway across the country. So that was one thing we learned. So they're very much in demand, so we're lucky to be able to get them to do our job for us. So yeah.
Your visit.
Oh, so I went down to the reason I can tell you about that is because I actually did a trip down and visited their joinery shop. And I was very impressed with what I saw there. It's a decent sized shop. They've got a lot of more modern machinery. I mean, they're doing these windows in the traditional method, but they're using more modern equipment. So sort of high volume machines to machine the pieces that we need to put the windows together. So it's very efficient down there, and they've got a good crew. So
Paul took some wonderful pictures while he was there, and when we go up into the balcony to see the window, they're playing up there.
Oh, are they? Yeah. Okay, great. So I brought back with me a piece of timber, if anyone wants to look at it. It's a bit of, they call it Brazilian mahogany. So there's a few different choices of timber that we can use to do the windows, but this seemed like probably the best choice for us.
Good. Perfect. Thank you.
Anything else?
I think that's good.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to talk about it.
We'll be wandering around for questions.
What type of glass are you talking about? Are you keeping the old panes, or are you?
We're not keeping the old panes. They will be using antique glass recycled from other windows.
Okay.
And we hope that when ours are removed, that our wood glass will be used in other projects too. That was one of the challenges if we restored the windows completely, because they would take the window out completely. So now you've got to board it up. If they work on one at a time, that's not too obtrusive, but if they took out 8 or 10 windows, we'd have plywood up for a summer or more, which would, it's one of those things that you think about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they can't guarantee that they would use the same glass, because if there's any scratches, they won't put it back in.
Right.
And if they can't, it's a challenge to clean it up. The old glazing, a lot of it had lead on it. You probably know better than I, and it's very hard to get off and clean properly. In fact, the shop is starting a glazing company, right?
Yeah, I had a look at one of their shops separate to the joinery shop is their sort of their restoration shop. So they also do restorations there. But a lot of the time they find that when they pull the glass out of the old windows, they'll find and clean it up, they find that they'll have the odd scratch or two. Some people don't mind having the odd scratch or two. Other people totally reject the sashes if they have scratches in the glass. So they're actually making their own glass now. And it comes out with the wave in it like historic old glass would have. So it's pretty amazing. They did show me a piece of the new glass, and it's not as wavy as an old, 100-year-old piece, but it still does have a wave in it, which is pretty impressive to see that they can do that.
What species are the existing sashes made of?
That's a good question. We suspect that it's probably going to be northeastern pine, but it's probably heart pine. So it's very durable timber. I mean, and it's old growth as well. So it's, the actual timber in these sashes is probably still good for another 100 years, but it's just the whole integrity of the sash is sort of compromised at this point. But yeah, that timber could probably be recycled into something, and just can't get that anymore.
Cool, thank you. So this is a part of ongoing work at the church. As you can see by sitting here, the hardwood floors have been done. We started 6 years ago. We did hardwood floors. It's about 4,000 square feet that were done here. And the hallways, the offices, the balcony, and the platform area. We did a lot of interior painting. We painted the west side of the church, which is really, really, really big. You know, it's probably 3 times a house. I don't know, it's just enormous. You're talking quantity. We replaced all the red carpeting. We replaced the cushions upstairs and downstairs. We upgraded the lighting. We're 100% LED lighting now. A number of things. So that it's ongoing. We're you know, working to keep this building up or move it into the next century, if you will, by whatever we can do to keep it going. And we really don't want to do shortcuts, and that means expending. So, you know, here we are. We're trying to find some money so we can do it right. You know, we talk about copper and, you know, old growth wood. You know, that's something that lasts, and that's where we're headed. Something that, you know, hopefully the next generation can look back and say, yeah, you guys did it right. You know, it lasted. We're able to maintain it, and we don't have to start over. So that's sort of our goal, our mantra. So, any other questions before we head up?
Why don't we go out front
Sure.
first, while there's still some light?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Meander wherever you want.
We show them the broken window.
Chocolate.
Why don't we go out front? We can see the Palladian window and the portico, and some of the smaller side double-hung windows.
It's a hardwood, it's a rainforest
Yeah, well, that's
Sorry, yeah, that's the iPad.
How thin the mullions are between the glass, and it's really elegant, but it's not the strongest thing in the world, and why it hasn't blown in our windstorms I don't know. The 2 windows on either side of it, they are double hung. They're supposed to operate, but there's no reason for them, so we have everything addressed there. And then you see the smaller windows on either side. There's actually 10 of those windows that we're replacing. Those are double hung windows. Go around the corner on either side. There's 2. There's 6 in the front, and there's 4 more on the back side of the sanctuary, which you can see from the sides. You can see the railing. Looks like it's going to fall down, but it's incredibly strong. I mean, you go up and actually touch the top of the railing, and we think of maybe fir or something with the hardwood, but a very straight grain. And where the paint was missing, it was still solid, good wood. It was surprisingly in good shape. So when the fellows looked at it, they simply said, no, we'll refurbish from that paint. But we did talk about PVC. I know that's, people get in arms about that.
Yeah, the pieces that are rotted, they're probably add-ons at some point. It's the actual, the core of the handrail, the balustrades and the uprights and the rail, they're probably all old growth timber, so they're probably still sound.
So at some point in the next month or so, when are they coming? Do you know when they're coming today?
Yeah, sometime in the next month or so. They're hoping to have it all back together and delivered by September.
Yeah.
So
That whole railing system will be coming off of there. Once they get off of there, we'll have a roofing come in and investigate what's under that asphalt. This gutter that you see is all copper. So we really think that there's copper underneath it. We hope we can save it. You know, whatever they have to do to make it waterproof again. And then the railing will be installed in the fall back to its original. And we might have windows in by then. I don't know. Could be. They're working on it, right?
that's right, yep. We will definitely have windows delivered. We still need to work on installing them.
Installing them costs about as much as it does to build. Yeah. Well, you don't want to screw that part up. Right? It's like, here's your new window. Sorry, it doesn't fit. It's just one of those things. So we're working on that. I install. We could have the same company do it. We also have some other options too. So we're looking at that. We do have around the corner, if you hadn't noticed, I don't want you to look at it, but one of those wall double on the windows has failed completely, and we've got like a piece of cardboard taped up there. I think that's what kind of convinced that we needed to rebuild them, when we started looking at the integrity of all the other ones. As nice as some of them were, corners where they're assembled. Strong. Questions out here?
So the glass of these windows is 100 years old, is that what you're suspecting? Yeah. I mean, I don't see any weights in them, but,
You can tell them inside.
yeah, okay. I mean, I'm glad you're gonna try to replace like for like, but, you can't even see it from down here,
Right.
from the exterior, which is what our commission cares most about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know you're fussy.
We love the
I
wavy
heard from the
glass.
source.
About the lady glass.
Oh, the one that lives in my house?
Yeah.
Yeah. She wants to replace our windows. I said, no way.
She wants to buy, maybe she could buy their one.
Now, you know, bigger than you think, though. If you
come
were
back
to
here
put a
and
regular
get-
piece of glass next to it, you would see the difference, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see it. Well, I think, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
I'm looking for onion glass. I thought it was called onion glass. But we fit a lot of furniture too. Okay, so the wavy glass. Sure, yeah, okay.
Can you see anything?
flashes over that slate. So the whole front of the church, back 3/4 of the whole slate roof. That does bring about some problems when you talk about doing some repair or painting. You got to be very careful. You don't want to be walking on the slate because it does break. It's stone, it's thin stone, so you do have to be careful. The company that we're looking to hire to do some painting on the steeple will be doing everything from the lift, so they won't have to be putting up ladders or walking on the roof. So that's a relief to us. The rust you see coming over the edge of the cornice there in the lower part is rust from the frame that holds the bell. It's all big steel I-beam cross piece, so it's not. That's all copper that you see. There's the staining from the frame of the bell that's coming over it. And in the very upper part, you can see a little bit of the cornices pulling apart. We're not sure. Some of that's wood, and some of that is. Everything will stay the same. The top green, copper doesn't get touched. All the white gets white. The green shutter that gets painted the same color, and everything gets painted white. And a little bit of carpentry. You can't quite see, but on this cross piece above the horizontal piece above the Palladian window, you can see just the bottom two horses of clapboards are lifting a little bit, and it's probably just the way they're sitting on a flashing. Hopefully we don't have to replace those. And then it's just. We go to the sailing club in the summer. The bottom section of the Palladian window. At one time, the two side pieces were operational. There's no reason for them to be, so that's all part of the lower part of what's being replaced on the Palladian unit. And we have stairs, we can go up higher.
There's two sets of stairs, so you can choose which one.
So a keen eye can look right through there and see air. And you'll see that the strength has really gone out of it, and you have to be really careful. And the glazing has a hard time holding on to that because it's moving every time the wind blows. So this is a really tricky part to rebuild, and that's why we're happy that we're building new windows. This is where the strength is really lost. So we're going to have a brand new window. It's going to look just like that, and it's going to be stronger and have the old glass in it. If you move side to side, you can see some of the ripples in it, but not as noticeable as some of the glass in the side windows of the windows down below. So these are the smaller windows either side of it, and then there's another small window that we looked at down below on the side on the two rooms that are in the corner of the building, and they have there's actually 3 windows in each one of those.
So there's a few different buildings here. This is one where apparently that is the oldest building in Rhode Island. And they took it down and reconstructed it there in their workshop. This is the joinery shop. You can see a few things scattered around the workshop there. They're working with real wood. They're replicating a lot of stuff. They're doing a job in there for Yale University at the moment, so they're reproducing a lot of the timber work that's coming out of there. So I guess money's no object on that job. Everything's being done properly. Yeah, here they are making a template, like Phil said. This is a window that they can't really just measure. They need to set it out, probably on a piece of plywood like that, take it back to their shop. It's an interesting, that's actually a window up there that they put together. There's some of the modern windows that they make that are thermally efficient. So we've got high expectations from them, haven't we?
We do. Yes, we do. We expect it to be perfect.
One of the benefits of getting them to do it, as Phil described earlier, was that instead of taking our windows away and boarding up the openings and waiting months and months, we actually get to leave the old sashes in there, have the new ones made and then delivered and stored here, and then when we're ready to fit them, we can do one window at a time, sort of thing, so that we don't have the place boarded up, which is one advantage. Yeah, that's an amazing old frame here. You had that set up in one of his shops there.
And that is the oldest house, is that what
He said it was the oldest, it might have been the oldest house in the northeast.
Mm.
I mean, it dated back to 1600 or something.
Mm.
And they'd somehow taken it apart and brought it back piece by piece and assembled it there. But yeah, they were sort of building it again there in the shop, and they were going to be using it for some education purposes, I guess. Teaching people how the traditional framing was done, stuff like that.
Looks great. You're welcome to look at the sanctuary. It's kind of a nice view from up here. We have the 8 curved windows in the sanctuary, and at some point we would be redoing those. Those don't get replaced. They're in good shape. They just need to be reflashed and painted, and some new weights put on them so they work properly as a double hung window. The bell tower sits on the 4 posts, the 2 behind the flag, and then these covered posts here next to John and Merle.
Room down there, right at street level, and used to go to the basement for coffee.
I wouldn't know. I said go with
Looks like a good westerly wind, water
What
would
tends to happen
come
is you
through.
don't paint the areas that you
Water,
don't see.
did you guys see water come through there?
I drove past here after every storm, and I kind of look at the corner of my eye and just hope that it's still there.
Oh,
Part of
exactly.
protection for some
I'm afraid to look.
Exactly.
So you can see how much of this
Getting lights up to the top of
It is good. I had a roofing company that did the asphalt, it's 2 years now, went up and put in, I think, 10 pieces of slate. We had some slide off.
Yeah,
They don't some of them down, so they went up with their own slate.
It's a beautiful window.
That's a nice thing about
I think
slate.
this window really is something that really, when you look at a building and there's a design that pops,
Yes, you're right.
this is it for this building.
And to be 60 feet away from
So bad, stay on
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But
So if you'd like to go back and stay on the area shots,
second story in the
give them more seconds here.
Okay, come back up.
bell tower.
Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, we met in Jim.